My blog for today discusses why the DEI backlash, a history of inclusion that's been forgotten. So, as we all know lately, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, has become a lightning rod for controversy, with critics decrying it as unnecessary, as it being divisive, or even discriminatory. But let's pause and ask a critical question. Why wouldn't organizations and leaders want to ensure diverse representation, equitable practices, inclusive decision making, and cultures where everyone thrives? What is so threatening about fairness, belonging, and psychological safety? Well, the truth is, DEI has never been solely about race. Yet, in today's politicized environment, its purpose has been distorted. Many people believe it is to be a modern initiative, but its roots in equitable policies date back centuries. Let's set the record straight. DEI is not about giving unearned advantages, it's also about ensuring systems work fairly for all. And if you think that's new, think again. So let's dive into the history, the forgotten history of equity in hiring. Did you know that one of the earliest efforts to promote equity in hiring was aimed at U.S. military veterans? Following the Civil War of 1865, policies were introduced to provide employment preferences to war veterans and their widows. This was later expanded in 1876, where veterans received preferential treatment during reductions in force. In 1921 and 1929, Presidents Harding and Coolidge signed executive orders. Sound familiar? They signed executive orders granting 10-point hiring preferences for veterans in federal jobs. In 1944, the Veterans Preference Act strengthened these policies, ensuring that job security and training opportunities for disabled veterans and widows existed. Over time, there were additional protections that were given to veterans of later wars. It was given to their families and those transitioning into civilian jobs. So, where was the backlash then? Because there was preference. So, where was the backlash? That's what they're complaining about now. And then when we think about who has benefited most from DEI and affirmative action, despite the narrative that DEI and affirmative action primarily benefits racial minorities, statistics show and studies show that white women have been the largest beneficiaries of these policies. According to the US Department of Labor, white women have made more career advances due to affirmative action than any other demographic group. Research from Princeton University also highlights that gender-based affirmative action has driven significant workplace diversity gains. Benefiting who? White women in leadership and executive positions. Also, veterans and people with disabilities and individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds have long been recipients of policies designed to level the playing field. These groups are rarely mentioned in today's anti-DEI rhetoric, but why is that? So there's a myth that is at the root of this, and it's the myth of reverse discrimination. Critics often argue that DEI initiatives result in reverse discrimination. But let's be clear, equity does not mean exclusion. Equitable hiring and promotion practices don't take opportunities away from any one group. What they do is they ensure access for all qualified individuals, particularly those that have been historically overlooked. So organizations with strong DEI strategies, they have higher employee engagement, employee retention, greater innovation, and stronger financial performance because they're gathering the best, the brightest, the most skilled, and the most qualified against all social categories. Companies that are now abandoning DEI initiatives in response to the political pressures and societal climate, they're going to soon find themselves at a disadvantage. because they'll be struggling with talent shortages and reputational damages. And one of those reasons is because people now are demanding that there's equity in policies, practices, promotions, and programs. So inclusion isn't charity. Affirmative action isn't charity. DEI isn't charity. It's smart business. And we have to just ask ourselves the question, why the backlash now? If these policies have existed for well over a century, they weren't called DEI, but the policies and the structure and the framework has existed for well over a century. If hiring preferences have long benefited veterans, white women, or other underrepresented groups, why is DEI suddenly under attack? What is it about today's efforts to build equity that has sparked outrage when the same principles were embraced in the past? Maybe, just perhaps, the answer lies in who is being centered in these conversations. And we know who's being centered. I don't have to say it, but we do know who's being centered. Perhaps it's not about equity itself, but who gets the benefit? So here's the challenge. What exactly are we opposing when we reject DEI? And fine, let's move beyond the acronym of DEI. What exactly are we opposing when we reject equity in our policies, our practices, and our programs? What are we opposing when we're asking for the people who decisions are being made about to be included in that decision-making process? What exactly are we opposing when we talk about having equitable outcomes? What exactly are we opposing when we're talking about equitable access? What exactly are we opposing when we're talking about creating a culture of psychological safety for our employees? What exactly are we opposing when we're talking about creating cultures where everyone feels comfortable coming to work, who they are respectfully, and feel that they can thrive and be cared for? What are we opposing? Are we against fairness? Are we against inclusive leadership? Cultures where everyone, regardless of their background, have a chance to thrive when the tenets of DEI exist. So what are we opposing? And if this is what we're opposing, then the real issue isn't DEI at all. The issue is fear of change. The issue is fear of losing power. The issue is fear of losing privilege. So what kind of future do we want to build? One that thrives on innovation, fairness, and belonging, or one that clings to outdated structures of inclusion? What kind of future do we want to build? One where we're under a climate where executive orders or corporate mandates can have us fearing being accepted and understanding that we must now assimilate to the normative culture or the majority culture? What kind of future do we want to build for ourselves individually? And what kind of future do you, as a business owner, do you as a corporate executive, or do you as an employee within a corporation, what do you want to build? The choice is ours, but we have to use our voices collectively to make sure that our message is heard.